I don't think it's any news to any of us that we live in a fallen world. And what does that mean when it comes to you and me? It means we make mistakes, we mess things up, we do things that we don't want to do. Sometimes some of the things we do have unintended consequences. We end up hurting other people. And interestingly enough, in the same way, other people end up hurting us. Sometimes they don't mean to. Sometimes they mean to. Some people take serious advantage of us. And one of the things that really short circuits the life of a believer is unforgiveness. And it's so easy to go there. I mean, if somebody does something to you that really hurts you, somebody takes advantage of you in some way, lies to you, cheats you, it really hurts. And it is easy to go into a place of unforgiveness. In fact, sometimes we have problems forgiving ourselves. We will say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And yet, unforgiveness short circuits a believer's life in so many ways. For one thing, it leads to anger that just is this incipient thing that makes it always seem like we're on a short fuse. It's so hard to be peaceful, really, genuinely peaceful. To have the peace of God in our life, it's so, what a wonderful blessing to be peaceful. And it's so hard to be peaceful if we're angry. And unforgiveness is so often the root of anger. So anger and unforgiveness are two things that as Christians we really need to get rid of. And in Matthew 18, Christ told us something that would help us keep forgiveness in perspective. And it starts out, Jesus is talking here, Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, and he starts out by saying, if your brother sins against you. So the context of what Christ is talking about is somebody sinning against you, somebody causing you problems, someone making problems in your life. And at that point, it's easy to remember those, catalog those, and either just have a plain old lack of forgiveness or an anger that's caused by it. And so Peter, of course, after Jesus goes through what to do if somebody sins against you, Peter's going to step up to the plate and be pretty bold here. And he says, it says in verse 21, Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? And now Peter is thinking he's going to show some real largesse here, some real grace. He says, up to 7 times? And he's thinking that Jesus is going to go, oh, Peter, that's so wonderful. 7 times. That's very magnanimous on your part. That's great. Yeah, that'll work fine. But you and I both know if you're in a close relationship with somebody, they sin against you many more times than 7. Sometimes we sin against others many more times than 7, and we end up having to forgive ourselves. 7 is no kind of benchmark for true peace, true godliness, true love. 7 is no kind of benchmark for that. So Jesus then goes off to tell a parable about forgiveness. And here's the parable he tells. It says, Jesus says, I tell you not 7 times, but 70 times 7. And there's ways to translate that we won't get into here. Verse 23, Jesus says, therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlements, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to pay the debt. This, by the way, is very biblical, very cultural. That if in that time period, you just didn't say, oh, well, sorry, I don't have the money, and you declared bankruptcy. First, to stay out of slavery, you would sell your children into slavery, and then the wife would be sold into slavery. And then lastly, if there was still debt left over, the man himself would be sold into slavery. That was just part of the biblical culture, which held over from Old Testament times into Roman times. So the king was going to do that. He was just going to sell them all and see if he could get a dent on paying this debt. Verse 26, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. That's amazing. The master, he saw the heart of the servant, that he wanted to be forgiven, and he just said, okay, it's all forgiven. But when that servant went out, he's now been forgiven. But when he went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. His fellow servant fell on his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me and I will pay you back." He should have had mercy at that point. That's what had happened to him. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could collect the debt. He could pay the debt. And the other servants saw that it happened. They were distressed and went and told the master everything. And then the master became very upset. Now, this parable actually makes a harder impact if you understand what's going on. The scripture says that this servant owed the king 10,000 talents. Now, we can't get a picture of what's going on here unless we can understand the debts involved. Well, what's a talent? A talent in the Roman, it wasn't a coin, it was a measure of weight, but it was used because it was a measure of weight of a precious metal. It was used as a coinage equivalent. Maybe like we might write $1 million bill or something to take care of all the little ones, get them out of the way. A talent was worth 6,000 denarii. Now, a denarius was a day's wage. 1 day's wage for a field worker, a soldier, what we'd call minimum wage work. A denarius was 1 day's wage. So a talent is 6,000 work days. Okay? Now there's about 250 work days a year, but then you got to separate vacations and stuff like that. So people argue 240 work days a year, 235 work days a year, something like that. You got to take away sick days and that kind of thing. So figuring out 6,000 days, 250 work days a year, a talent is about 20 years worth of work. 20 years worth. Now, this servant owed 10,000 talents. Figure it out. That's 200,000 years. This servant owed the king 200,000 years worth of work. And all he did was fall on his face and say, wow, I just really need to be forgiven here. And it says the king forgave him everything. Now, the servant goes out and finds a fellow servant who owes him 100 denarii. Now, 100 denarii is 100 days' work. Okay, 100 days' work is nothing to snuff at. I mean, at a minimum wage, $8 an hour, $64 a day, you got what? A little over $6,000. If somebody owes you $6,000, that's, it's nothing to snuff at. And when people sin against you, it's nothing to snuff at. It's not like we just say, oh, it's nothing, it's nothing. When people sin against us, it hurts. When people take advantage of us, it hurts. And one of the ways that we can keep that hurt in perspective and are able to let it go is if we just understand the message of this parable and understand what God forgave us for. I mean, come on, let's get out our legal pads here. Let's get out our legal pads and start writing down every sin we've ever sinned in our whole life against God. We would be working, we'd be working them off for 200,000 years. You bet we would. Every evil thought, every time we haven't forgiven someone when he commands us to forgive, every single time we've used a 4-letter word when God says don't use obscenity, anytime we've taken the Lord's name in vain, anytime we've exaggerated, anytime we've said anything bad against our neighbor that wasn't true, oh my gosh, if we start thinking about every sin we've ever forgiven against God, can you imagine the huge amount that is? And what do? I mean, seriously, what do we do with this gigantic debt that we've wrought against God? We go to him and we say, wow, God, I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. And God looks at our heart and says, okay, all right, I get your heart. You're forgiven. You're kidding. I've got this gigantic legal pad, probably stacks of legal pads, filled with sins against God. I lay him at his feet. I say, I'm really sorry. I am really sorry. No kidding. And he just forgives it. And now there's somebody who sinned against us. Okay, it hurt. Okay, it's worth $6,000. You know, it's a real sin. I'm not talking about the fact that somebody came into your house and stole a toothpick. It's $6,000. It's a real sin. But it's only $6,000. It's not 200,000 years worth of working your tail off to try to get a debt paid off. And you know what? You and I need to keep that in perspective, because people may have sinned against you. People may have hurt you. We need to forgive them and let it go. It's the only way we're going to be in peace. And I guarantee God has forgiven us for much more. So let's take hold of the peace and the joy that we can have in life, not hold people's faults against them. Let's forgive others the way God has forgiven us. God bless you. Thanks so much for watching this video. And if you'd like to contribute to making more videos like this, please consider donating at our website, stfonline.org/donate. And if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button below so you get notified of our future videos. God bless you.